Hi, and welcome along to the next of my best of selection videos for 2023. This particular video is actually not a best of at all. Behind me on the ladder is a collection of all of the apricots, yellows and oranges, ranging from the very palest at the very top all the way through down into the golden yellows and into the very strong burnt oranges at the bottom here, lined up to give you a little bit of a variance of colour, form, size of flower. Again, this video sparked by the introduction this year of the new rose from David Austin Roses, obviously Dannahue, which unfortunately is not in bloom today, but these videos are particularly difficult to deal with, and you have to make a mark in the sand at some point and decide when you're not going to film. So I think I've got 18 or 19 roses lined up behind me, which I'm going to bring you in this video. Please do remember to hit subscribe or follow, depending on what platform you're joining me on. Make sure that you like this video and leave a comment. And if you find it particularly useful, you want to use it at a later date, please make sure you save it somewhere as well, so you know where it is for later. Every single rose, apart from one on the ladder behind me. I don't know why I haven't reviewed this particular rose, but I haven't done. Every single rose behind me on the ladder, plus a few that I will make a note of in just a moment, actually have their own individual personal rose reviews. So please do head up to my story highlights on Instagram or over to my YouTube channel and watch the full review if there's a stunning rose here that actually catches your attention. Roses that aren't in flower that would have made this selection today. There's several, but the ones to make a note of are the likes of Port Sunlight, the new introduction into the UK market for 2023, which is Dannahue, and the Lady Emma Hamilton. Unfortunately, no blooms and Golden Celebration. No blooms on those at all. I'd also hoped to bring you Togmister from Peterbilt's, would have made a really lovely addition to this particular selection as well. Again, those roses all have personal reviews. You'll find them up in my story highlights or over on my YouTube channel. So let's get into it. There's an awful lot of roses behind me. They're all packed in pretty tight, so I'm hoping I'm going to be able to move through these without making too much of a mess. Right at the very top of the shop, and the most palest of them all, is the only rose, for some reason, in this collection that I'm yet to review. Discontinued now here in the UK by David Austin Roses. This one is the Crocus Rose. I have mine planted in the garden alongside the Lady Gardner, and it makes a really lovely comparison. This rose described as a very heavy ivory cream, and you can see in this light a really lovely peachy undertone to the blooms and a lovely buttery yellow centre. This particular rose by David Austin was, I think, introduced in the year 2000, which is why it's now been discontinued. It forms a really lovely 3 feet by 3 feet shrub rose, which is absolutely fantastic. I've got it planted right at the front of the border. As you can see, a really pretty rose, but I'm yet to review this one. A really pretty one, very pale. Next to it, at the very top here, is an introduction from way back when we were all locked away in our homes during lockdown. This particular beauty is Nye Bevin, introduced by David Austin Roses in 2021. This rose is of the palest apricot yellow. It has the most wonderful iridescent sheen to it, and very distinctive. If I bring that close into the camera for you, very distinctive heart-shaped petals that are almost like little bunny ears. It's incredibly cute. This particular rose, very upright and very standard in its growth, very sort of cylindrical and pillar-like, only reaching around 2.5 to 3 feet high. It's very narrow indeed, only reaching about 1.5 feet wide. This particular rose, if you're looking to cut it, is not a perfect addition to be cutting and bringing into the house. It actually shatters within minutes and hours once you cut it, so I'm expecting this one to fall apart at any time. But this one is Nye Bevin. Doesn't last particularly well on the bush either. Blooms actually shattering and being pollinated very quickly, but the blooms are very numerous. It's got a very fast repeat on it and a really quite nice warm and spicy fragrance. So this one is Nye Bevin. Alongside it, a rose that has a huge cult following. This particular rose, very, very similar to Jude the Obscure, which is not actually in this collection today because it's not in flower. This beauty is Woolerton Old Hall, and you can see very, very distinctly very heavy, large, chalice-shaped blooms, which almost turn inwards on themselves, hiding that lovely collection of stamens in the centre. But this one is Woolerton Old Hall. A climbing rose from David Austin Roses, reaching around 12 to 15 feet. So a really very useful modern shrub climbing rose that very, very useful in the garden for either a pillar or a post or a statement piece up a wall. But this is Woolerton Old Hall. This particular rose, slow off the mark to get established. Mine here in the North Lodge Cottage Garden, just reaching 3 to 4 years old now, and only really just starting to find its feet, producing large sprays of flowers like this one here. But as you can see, very, very, very pale apricot, with once again that lovely golden iridescent sheen to the flowers. So this one is Woolerton Old Hall. Alongside it, once again on the top of the shop, this one is a Rambler from David Austin Roses, and he needs no introduction at all. An absolute cracker of a plant. This one is Malvern Hills. The colour on this one varies all the way, as you can see from the young flower just there, from a lovely, strong, rich, buttery golden cream, all the way through to this lovely bleached out, heavy cream indeed. A really nice flower. As you can see, I've got this up on the top, quite nicely positioned for this particular rose as well, hanging down and nodding beautifully. This Rambler from David Austin Roses produces the most wonderful new growth, scarlet red in its colour as it grows, huge, great big long leaders. Now, there's a bit of a trial this year, and because I ran out of time, I didn't actually deadhead Malvern Hills. I've simply left it. The rose, they actually have fallen off. The repeat is still as strong as you would expect on a David Austin Roses if you had deadheaded it. So I'm going to leave it alone. I'm not going to play around with it too much because it's got plenty of new flowers to come. But this one is Malvern Hills. So that completes the very, very, very pale ones on the top of the shop. Then we're moving down into some of the lighter apricots. A firm favourite here in the North Lodge Cottage Garden with me. This rose needs no introduction. Look at those peachy, yellow, pinky tones. This one is, of course, the Lark Ascending. A really useful shrub rose from David Austin Roses, loved by the pollinators, absolutely adored by myself. This is a really big plant, which if you wanted to, you can try fan training against a wall, or should you wish to, this particular rose, you can plant as a statement piece, give it a pillar or a post, or plant it as an informal hedge. Mine here in the garden reaches in excess of 7 feet every year, towering high in the border along with the hollyhocks and the other really large perennials at this time of year, reaching for the sky. There's something about the way the Lark Ascending catches the light. At this particular time of year, it's an absolute cracker, but look at the colours there, rippling everywhere from heavy cream through to yellow, peach, and obviously that strong apricot. A really, really pretty semi-double rose, which is well worth growing. Very little fragrance on that one, but it does produce great hips if you leave that one undeadheaded towards the back end of the season. Next to it, another rose making it onto several of my best of collections. This is Tottering by Gently. Another one from David Austin Roses, which is very, very simple, perfect for pollinators and great for putting into a mixed border or as just a little bit of a palette cleanser, as I call it. It's simplistic flowers, very, very similar to its white cousin, which is Kew Gardens. It just has the most adorable structure. Each bloom made up of 5 petals, very, very simple in its makeup indeed. Lovely cluster of golden yellow stamens tipped with a beautiful tiny bit of brass at the very end. This one is Tottering by Gently. Next to it, this particular rose is not showing its true colours today, and I don't quite know why, because the temperatures are fairly cool, but the blooms are a very distinctive shape, and it shouldn't need much introduction with yourselves if you follow me closely. With very, very pale green foliage and woody upright growth and these pendulous blooms which hang down towards the ground, this one is Grace. It has star-shaped flowers. If I bring that one in very close to the camera, you can see there a little point on the edge of every single petal, meaning it looks very similar to James Galway, the climbing pink rose from David Austin Roses, and the Pilgrim, that lovely sort of surprised look to it. Very, very attractive looking rose, but this is Grace. only reaching around 3 feet by 3 feet. This particular rose is great for planting right at the front of a border. Again, little or no scent, but as you can see, incredibly beautiful. That lovely light apricot colour backed by really fresh lime green foliage and these really distinctive orange and red tinged buds, which I really like. So that one is Grace. Next to it, a firm favourite here in the garden, so much so that I actually have several of these, and this particular cracking rose makes it onto several of these best of collections. This one is the Country Parson. It's obviously its sister rose Harlow Carr, also making it onto the best for fragrance range, but you can see lovely buttery yellow flowers, very, very fussy in their makeup, lots and lots of frill and flounce to the edges of the petals, making it really lovely, really interesting, and the fragrance, oh, it's so strong on this particular rose. If you can put up with a high thorn count, this is a really great rose for planting alongside paths if you don't have young children or pets that are going to be using those areas, where you can really enjoy its fragrance. The colour, once again, ranging in the tight bud form from everywhere from a strong buttery yellow right the way through to a heavy cream. A little bleached halo often developing around the edge of the flower just as it ages and before the petals drop. So that one is the Country Parson. Right, down on the next stage. When my husband saw this particular lineup put out today, this was the rose that he was drawn to, and I'm really glad it is. And I planted this somewhere in the garden from the kitchen window where we can see it a lot when we move it around the cottage. This one is Dame Judi Dench, and you can see the fully blown flower there. Oh, it's all falling apart. A really, really rich apricot colour, and the newer flower here, more golden in its hues, producing a fairly large shrub that's almost as wide as it is tall, around 4.5 to 5 feet high and around 4.5 to 5 feet wide. A really substantial shrub. The word is from David Austin Roses that if you wanted to train this as a sub-shrub, maybe against a wall or the side of a rose arch or any sort of archway or pillar, you could have a go at fan training this one, because it is actually really quite scrawly and quite floppy in its habit. And obviously the blooms are quite fairly large. This one falling apart now, but reaching some 4.5, maybe 5 inches across. This one is Dame Judi Dench. Alongside it, not the best blooms from this particular rose, but a firm favourite here, making it well into my top 20, 2 or 3 years in a row. Now, unfortunately, discontinued here in the UK, but still widely available. All of the roses behind me will also be identified by their Latin name in the caption with this particular video. So if there's a rose you are interested in that is actually discontinued, maybe here in the UK, or you're struggling to get a hold of anywhere else in the world, please do make sure you also search for stockists using its Latin name. They may be actually growing it under license. It might not be copywritten by David Austin under its given name. This particular rose is Crown Princess Margarita. A really useful shrub rose for growing anywhere in the garden, but it does thrive in partial shade. So plant this in a dark spot in the garden where its emerald green leaves, really, really high and glossy, will absolutely love the dappled shade, somewhere in the region of about 4, maybe 4.5 hours worth of sunlight per day, and it will reward you with absolutely masses of heavy apricot flowers with the most extraordinary fragrance. This particular rose I absolutely adore. I'm lucky enough to have 3 or 4 of these dotted about the garden, some in partial shade and one in full sun. They perform equally well in both aspects, but this is Crown Princess Margarita. Next to it, I know all of you love this rose, and when I did a poll of what your favourite rose was way back at the beginning of this year, this gentleman ranked one of the highest I've ever seen. So many comments commenting on Roald Dahl. Again, a fantastic little shrub rose from David Austin Roses, very, very deeply cupped on a heavy, bold flower, a lovely rosette in the centre there, a lovely, rich apricot orange with beautiful orange apricot-tipped buds. Fresh lime green foliage and upright growth. Again, a shrub rose, only reaching around 3.5 to 4 feet tall and thriving also in partial shade. So if you want to put this rose into a dark spot in the garden, much like Crown Princess Margarita, this will thrive on just 3 or 4 hours worth of direct sunlight per day. So this is Roald Dahl. Another rose, incidentally, before I put it down, that also will produce fantastic hips come the autumn as well if you don't deadhead it. Next to it, a firm favourite with me and something that's going to be storming very highly into my most recommended top 20 this year. Introduced by David Austin Roses just last year, this stunner is Bring Me Sunshine. And one of the reasons why I bring you these comparison videos and I launched my original rose reviews is because not directly just at David Austin, but I get so frustrated with the colours that you see on the websites and also in the brochures. This particular rose, when it was launched, looked very, very coppery, very brassy in the advertisements on the website and of course in the David Austin catalogue. But you can see here, there is no brass to this gentleman whatsoever. Bring Me Sunshine from David Austin Roses is pure gold. It absolutely emits sunshine. So quite why it's been filtered on websites and on the catalogues to be looking so brassy, I don't know. But Bring Me Sunshine from David Austin Roses is an absolute belter. Going to be rating really highly in my new top 20. It's a really large shrub rose, reaching something in the region of 5.5, 6, maybe even 6.5 feet. It's going to need some support, so do make sure that you get in there with a pillar, post or an obelisk, or do something like me and I've just given it a basic wigwam of pea sticks to climb up. But mine is already towering in a pot up to around 6.5, coming on to 7 feet. So this one is Bring Me Sunshine. Moving down the runs into the more rich golden tones of the ones below. This one ranking really heavily in the best for fragrance ranges. This one is the stunning Poet's Wife, and I mean, obviously I'm surrounded by roses here, many of which have fantastic fragrances, but as soon as I've picked up the Poet's Wife, that fragrance just hits you. It's absolutely wonderful. And look at that colour, absolutely glowing from the flowers there. The kind of rose that you want to pick and bring into the house and make a real spectacle of. The Poet's Wife is an informal, large, floppy shrub, which I embrace. I allow her to ramble about the border wherever she wants, poking her head out here, poking her head out there. But this is the Poet's Wife, a really, really lovely, cracking rose from David Austin. And next to it, this one is Graham Thomas. Currently discontinued here in the UK, voted at one point Britain's favourite rose by a poll. Graham Thomas is a fabulous climbing rose from David Austin Roses. Really easy to manage. I have mine, funny enough, growing up the washing line post, where it's more than manageable, reaches around 8 feet, so it's really lovely. This is Graham Thomas. Next to it, for some reason, a rose that I overlooked for some time in the garden and didn't offer you my personal rose review until actually this year. Newly reviewed by myself, widely available and does very well in the drier climates. This one is Teasing Georgia. This particular rose, marketed as both a climber and a shrub rose. It's not a different graft, it's not a different plant. It's just basically how you actually manage it and how you prune it in your garden. If left unchecked and really sort of allowed to run, as a climber, Teasing Georgia will reach around 7 to 8 feet. As a shrub, it's going to be quite large. It's going to be 4.5 to 5 feet. Had a really good season this year during the months of May and June, where here in the UK, it was really very, very hot and very dry. Doesn't like cooler weather at all. It doesn't like the rain, where it suffers with a lot of black spot and a little bit of rust. But you can see Teasing Georgia putting on a really lovely show right now. I say reviewed during 2023. You'll be able to find the review for this one and all of the other roses we're talking about today up in my story highlights or down anywhere on my YouTube channel. So this one is Teasing Georgia. Next to it was a rose that I had to just track down. It took me ages to find this particular rose. Many of you in a recent poll on Instagram said you wouldn't buy this particular rose because of what it's named after. Now, I can't remember for the life of me, because I'm not into football, whose stadium Molino belongs to, but this is Molino from David Austin Roses, and it simply emits colour. Look at that. If I turn that towards the camera, look at the light on that. This particular rose took me ages to track down, and I planted it in a border just outside the kitchen window, actually alongside Dame Judy Dench, just there. They're sisters, and Nye Bevin is right next to it as well. But this rose really just emits colour. And from our pantry window, all you can see is this rose just glowing out of the window. I really normally struggle with strong primary colours like this, but there's something about the way this particular rose catches the light. As you can see, very, very fussy and frilly on the edges, picking up those lights lovely. It's a really nice upright rose, reaching around 3.5 to 4 feet. There is little or no fragrance. nothing there really to describe whatsoever. But Molino from David Austin Roses is an absolute cracking one. Please don't let the name put you off. So I'm not going to get into the whole football thing because I don't know whose stadium it is, but this one is Molino. Right, moving down into the last of these, there's actually 2 roses down on the bottom, the first of which actually isn't an Austin. There was 2 or 3 other roses that I wanted to bring you, but this one is really, really interesting. Actually from English breeder Peter Beals, this one is Leah Tutu, and I wanted to bring this one in this collection very basically because, again, this is another rose that I feel has been done dirty by the editors and over-filtering of the pictures of this one that appear online and also in the catalogue. It appears really muddy and dirty, really very unpleasant looking in the catalogue. And it wasn't until I saw this particular rose growing at, well, not growing, but exhibited at Chelsea Flower Show that I realised just how pretty it was. This one, as I say, is Leah Tutu. Very, very interesting petal shape and flower, almost looking surprised, like a little dahlia. This is from English breeder Peter Beals and is Leah Tutu. And next to it, 2 roses in this hue within the garden. Unfortunately, the Lady Emma Hamilton is not in flower just at the moment, but again, this rose should need no introduction. This one is the Lady of Shallot from David Austin Roses. This one also making it on to a new of my best of collections this year. Statement roses that are going to give you lots of bang for your buck. These are roses that you could plant in your garden if you're trying to save money, that were going to give you a huge impact and lots of flowers and lots of wow factor for not a huge amount of money. And the Lady of Shallot is going to do that for you. She's a really large shrub rose, reaching almost 5 feet by 5 feet. Again, needing some support, but unfortunately lacks some of the refinement that, for instance, the Lady Emma Hamilton has. This particular rose producing really deep, beautiful apricot flowers with a lovely burnt orange edge to it, but unfortunately no fragrance. This rose, however, has the ability to produce hundreds and hundreds of blooms at once, which is why it needs support. So that brings me to the end of this particular sort of yellow, pale cream, orange and apricot selection. I say this particular selection is missing several key players, things like Port Sunlight, the poet's wife, Lady Emma Hamilton, to name but a few, and Togmister from Peter Beals. But please do leave a comment, and if you need any assistance identifying a rose in this particular collection, please do leave me a comment below. But I hope you've enjoyed this comparison of the light yellows, apricots and oranges, and I will see you all again very soon now. Take care now. Bye bye.